Alright, shalom, shalom. I'd like to give all praises to the Most High, Yahuwah, and the Mashiach, Yahushua. Um, as a lot of you probably already know and are aware, that today is Thanksgiving. And, I use that term loosely, because really this is a time of mourning. But, you know, this is really, I just want to get down to the nitty gritty of the whole matter of the origins of where Thanksgiving comes from. It's pagan roots, because all these holidays, believe it or not, they're pagan. They have pagan origins. So before I begin, I'd like to start off with the scripture. Um, this is Matthew 18 and verse 3. Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. And that's a very important and deep scripture. And I think it's very important that we do humble ourselves in this truth and humble ourselves one to another in these last days, because time is very short and we don't have time to play around and go back and forth with each other. It's time that we love one another and come together in brotherly unity, especially during these times. I mean, holiday times, because the media is pushing it, the world's pushing it, family, friends, they're all pushing it, and these are some of the most tempting times, to everything. Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, you know, families all together, exchanging gifts, you might not have seen someone for like years, and come together, have some turkey, have some ham, have stuffing, and it's really a time that we all should be building up each other in the scripture and in the word, you know. So I think that was a very important scripture, that we humble ourselves. But get down to the nitty gritty of things. The real story of Thanksgiving. Most of us associate the holiday with happy pilgrims and Indians sitting down to a big feast, and that did happen once. The story began in 1614 when a band of English explorers sailed home to England with a ship full of Patuxet Indians bound for slavery. They left behind smallpox, which virtually wiped out those who had escaped. By the time the Pilgrims arrived in Massachusetts Bay, they found only one living Patuxet Indian, a man named Squanto, who had survived slavery in England and knew their language. He taught them to grow corn and to fish, and negotiated a peace treaty between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag Nation. All right. So, according to popular belief, they would like to tell you that before the Europeans arrived in America, that the natives were savages, that they were primitive people, that they had no culture, civilization, that they were killing each other, But according to this, the natives taught the European how to fend for himself in the winter, how to navigate through the forest, how to cook, how to, conduct agriculture, farming. But the so-called European, when he came over here, all he brought was smallpox and disease, things not native to the land of America. And that's just another lie that they teach in the schools, that science, arithmetic, all these things, agriculture, weren't here before the Europeans arrived. At the end of their first year, the Pilgrims held a great feast honoring Squanto and the Wampanoags. But as the word spread in England about the paradise to be found in the New World, religious zealots called Puritans began arriving by the boatload. Finding no fences around the land, they considered it to be the public domain. Joined by other British settlers, they seized land, capturing strong young natives for slaves and killing the rest. But the Pequot nation had not agreed to the peace treaty Squanto had negotiated, and they fought back. The Pequot War was one of the bloodiest Indian wars ever fought. So they keep telling you over and over that the natives were slaves and that they served slavery under the Europeans. So I don't know what a lot of brothers come out here saying, that the natives and the Latinos aren't Israelites. That's a heresy. That's a doctrine from the pits of hell, because that they totally fit the curses in Deuteronomy 28. This is Deuteronomy 28 and 48. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which Yahuwah shall send against thee, in hunger, and in thirst, and in nakedness, and in want of all things, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck, until he have destroyed thee. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. You see, and that's exactly what happened to the Native Americans. The eagle came over, the so-called European, that's his national emblem, and basically destroyed the so-called Native Americans. Virtually wiped them out. I mean, they didn't wipe them out because every nation is still here, according to Ecclesiastes 4. Continue. Verse 50. A nation of fierce countenance, who shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. See, they didn't care about none of that. They enslaved the so-called natives just as bad, if not as worse, as Judah. In 1637, near the present-day Groton, Connecticut, over 700 men, women, and children of the Pequot tribe had gathered for their annual Green Corn Festival, which is our Thanksgiving celebration, which is your Thanksgiving celebration. In the pre-dawn hours, the sleeping Indians were surrounded by English and Dutch mercenaries, who ordered them to come outside. Those who came out were shot or clubbed to death, while the terrified women and children who huddled inside the longhouse were burned alive. The next day, the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony declared a day of Thanksgiving because 700 unarmed men, women, and children had been murdered. So they basically commemorated this as a memorial of killing 700 Native American Indians, unarmed men, women, and children. You see, that's a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. And, that's crazy, really. This is what they hide from you. This is the truth that they don't declare in the schools and institutions. And this is why our people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Cheered by their victory, the brave colonists and their Indian allies attacked village after village. Women and children, over 14, were sold into slavery, while the rest were murdered. Boats loaded with as many as 500 slaves regularly left the ports of New England. Bounties were paid for Indian scalps to encourage as many deaths as possible. So, they were enslaved and put on boats, just like Judah. That's Deuteronomy 28 and 68. I ain't even gotta pull that, but that was prophecy being fulfilled right there of them going into captivity. This is Jeremiah chapter 50 and 33. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captives hold them fast. They refused to let them go. So if you know anything about Israelite history, during the time of the kingdom, when the kingdom split, the northern kingdom went into captivity to Assyria, and the southern kingdom, Judah and Benjamin, went into Babylon. So they didn't serve captivity together. This prophecy was being fulfilled just recently when the Europeans came over to the shores of America and enslaved the Native Americans, and in 1619 brought the southern kingdom, Judah, the so-called Negro. So that cuts a lot of that doctrine that natives aren't Hebrews, aren't Israelites. But to continue, following an especially successful raid against the Pequot in what is now Stamford, Connecticut, the churches announced a second day of Thanksgiving to celebrate victory over the heathen savages. You see, that's the label they put on us, a byword. During the feasting, the hacked off heads of natives were kicked through the street like soccer balls. Even the friendly Wampanoag did not escape the madness. Their chief was beheaded, and his head was impaled on a pole in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where it remained on display for 24 years. You see, and our people just follow anything the so-called white man puts in front of them. They don't really search out the origins of these days. And if you really look, the feast, the whole feast is satanic. You know, everything you have on the table is all based on bloodshed. The turkey represents the Native Americans. The cranberry sauce, it represents all the blood spilt. The stuffing represents when they stuff the heads and they kick them around like soccer balls. You see, our people don't read into these things. And that's Hosea 4:6, we're destroyed for a lack of knowledge. You know, we need to come out of that. But you know, it's just sick. It's really sick to really have to go through this, but no one else is going to bring out the truth. The killings became more and more frenzied, with days of Thanksgiving, feasts being held after each successful massacre. So they held they held a feast for every massacre. Every massacre, a feast. George Washington finally suggested that only one day of Thanksgiving per year be set aside instead of celebrating each and every massacre. Later, Abraham Lincoln decreed Thanksgiving Day to be a legal national holiday during the Civil War. So they were feasting every other day, basically. And George Washington, so-called American president, had to come in and you know, say, nah, we're going to do this annually, one day a year. You see, that's wicked. That's wicked. And the prophets talk about that. This is Isaiah chapter 10. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed. And that's something they prescribed. They made that a national holiday.